All right, this is a recitation session lesson 6. Three housekeeping items before we get started. Number one, I just want to reiterate and encourage everybody to make sure you are just encourage you to actually follow along in the recitation session file rather than just doing your assignment while watching this. This is an opportunity to get additional practice. So if you're having problems or struggling in the least bit with understanding all this stuff, I think you would do well to actually just go through the entire recitation session here. Just to remind you how to do that is if you log into Posit Cloud, you should have a space that looks like this with all the lessons listed. At the very bottom will be the recitation sessions. So I encourage you to actually go through the recitation sessions here with me before doing the assignment file so you get that additional practice. Second item is last week's assignment, just an apology. So every time in your assignments, when I tell you to create this file, I tell you what to name it. I often don't tell you what to name the column. So you're creating a new variable and what to name the variables in the report say. I often don't tell you what to do that, and the auto grader is just looking for that column. Except last week I neglected that some of them, for example, the plot was going to look for a particular, variable name. And it wouldn't always necessarily mark it wrong. The plots are a weird thing with the auto grader, but a few of those you're more likely to get it right if you had the right column name, and I didn't tell you what to do that. So I tried to pay attention to make sure that doesn't happen again, but I'm not the most detail-oriented person in the world, so that might not always, be the case. I might make that mistake. I tried to fix that for the rest of you once I learned of that error. So apologies for that. Third item, the midterm. People often, I think I already said in the intro video, in case you forgot, the midterm isn't really a midterm. It's not graded, like a midterm. It's not worth more points. It's just another assignment. The only difference between a midterm and a typical assignment is, number one, you don't have an instruction. It's just review. Second is I will just encourage you to use the midterm as an opportunity to self-test. As in, like, what is it that I need to do better? So I would encourage you to do the entire assignment before watching the recitation. I will still do a recitation session that will help you significantly on the assignment. I would encourage you to try to do the entire midterm assignment without looking at the recitation session, or do it before you come to this recitation session. And then try to do the entire assignment without getting any TA help. Once you figure out, here's the stuff I'm struggling with, here's the stuff that I need to learn better, then get your help with the TA. So that is just an opportunity for self-testing. Okay, let's move on to the recitation session. All right, so we are learning if statements and for loops, and I've tried to give you a little bit of application and show how useful these are. So I'm going to go through these really quickly. So this first one is just create these variables, right? That should be the easiest thing in the world for you now. We just have to say var1, var2, and var3, and var4, and just assign them the values listed there. So that should be something all of you can do without any difficulty. Okay, so there's our 4 values. Execute that, and now we have our 4 variables up here. Oops, I neglected. Let's go ahead and execute that. So we have our hotel evaluation data set that we will use later. Okay, I just want to give you some repeated practice on how do we create if statements. This is not difficult, but there's a lot of little parts, and you just need to get a habit of doing that. So we want to just check if the variable is greater than 50. If it is, we're going to print greater than 50. Okay, so the structure of an if statement is just if, and then immediately after that is the parentheses and the condition we want to check. We want to check whether var1 is greater than 50. So we create that condition var1 greater than 50. Anytime you do a greater than statement, that's going to return either true or false. So if that is true, what is here is going to be executed. Again, and then just a convention I like to use and encourage you to use is do a hard carriage return so that you can see this indentation there and know I'm inside this if statement. So the result of that if statement, if it resolves as true, then I want to print greater than 50. Okay, and when we execute that, we know variable 1 is 23, so this should not do anything. It turns out nothing happens when we do that because this evaluates as false. So it doesn't execute what's inside those curly brackets. We don't need to type this out 3 more times. We could just copy and paste it. I'm going to type it out 1 more time just to give us additional practice. So if parentheses, the condition we're checking, now we're checking var2. We're checking whether it's greater than 50. Close that parentheses, open up the curly brackets, do a carriage return. And what we want to execute is the same thing as before, is greater than 50. And we can execute that. And turns out, because var2 equals 50, it's not greater than 50, so nothing happens. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this for var2, var3 and var4. Just change this to var3, change this to var4. And what we expect is when I execute this, I should have greater than 50 printed twice, because we know var3 is greater than 50, greater 4 is greater than 50, and so this prints out twice. Okay, now just expanding on a simple if statement, there's also the if else. So if that's not true, then what do you want to have happen? We add the else. So I'm going to go ahead and type this first one out to give us more practice. So we want to check, is var1 greater than 50? And close the parentheses, open curly brackets, carriage return. We print greater than 50. Okay, if it's not, then what do we want it to do? The way we do that is at the end of that curly bracket, we just say else. Open up another curly bracket. Whatever we execute in here is going to execute whenever var1 is less than or equal to 50. So whenever that top statement evaluates as false, in which case we want to print less than or equal to 50. Okay, so that structure, I'm hoping to give you enough practice that structure becomes pretty second nature to you. If you still have to look it up, that's fine on the final exam. If you have to look it up, that's great. You can look it up on the final exam. That's not a problem, but it'll just be easier for you if this becomes a little bit more practiced. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and just copy that for var2, var3, and var4, which means I need to come in here, change var2. This is going to be var3, var4. So we should have 4 things printed, because we have 4 different separate if-else statements. 4 things printed, we should have less than or equal to 50 twice, and then greater than or equal, or greater than 50 another 2 times. So var1 and var2, var3, and var4. Okay, the other thing we can do is in an if statement, you can check again. So if this, then do something, if else, or else if, or if it's false, but then I want to check another statement. So you can have a whole system of things you're checking. So in this case, we're going to check if it's greater than 50, then we're going to check if it's equal to 50, and then we're going to say, well, if it's neither of those, then just say less than 50. So we'll type from the beginning again. We're going to say if var1 is greater than 50, close parentheses, open curly bracket, then we say print greater than 50. After that, we want to say, well, what if it's equal to 50? Then we have to say else, and then we just do another if statement. If var1 is equal to 50. And remember, when you're checking an equal statement, it has to be a double equals, right? If single equal signs mean you're assigning var1 to be the value of 50, not checking whether it is or is not. So it's a double equal sign. And then if it is equal to 50, then we're going to print equal or equals 50. And then finally, if that is also false, so if both of them are false, then we're going to say, all right, well, in that case, then we feel safe printing less than 50. Okay, when we do that, let's just check it. This one is less than 50 because var1 is 23. Okay, now we copy, paste that an additional 3 times. And don't forget, whenever you're copying and pasting and reapportioning code, make sure you correct all of the places, not just the first one. So var3 here and var3 there, var4 here, and for var4 right here. And then we have, so less than 50 equals 50, greater than and greater than. Okay, so if statements, not difficult, just some new terminology, new structures. You have to make sure you remember parentheses, then the bracket, or curly brackets. Okay, for loops are similar, right? We have, I guess we're not done. We're not doing our for loop quite yet, but the for loop, once we get to it, is going to be similar. We have a for, and then a parentheses to tell us how we're looping, and then in the brackets, what we loop through. So similar structure. should make it easy, a little easier to remember. So we're going to do vec1, which is, we want it to have 4 values. So it's a vector, and hopefully it's been a couple weeks, but hopefully you still remember that trusty combine function. Anytime you're combining values into a single vector, you use the combine function, and we just want 23, 50, 84, same values we had before, but instead of storing it in 4 different variables, we're going to store it in one variable called vec1. Vec2 is just going to be 4 zeros. And so the way, maybe instinctively, you'll do this. And that's fine. That works. I just want to show you another way, just in case you're ever asked to create like 170 zeros in a vector. There's a lot simpler way, and that's the replicate function. Replicate, you just is rep. So replicate, I want 0. And then the second entry is I want it 4 times. Okay, so that's just another way. Keep that in mind. We're going to reiterate this later. So this should become something that you're well practiced at, maybe by the end of this recitation session. So now we have vec1 and vec2. Vec1 is numeric with 4 values, 23, 50, 84, and 164. Vec2, also numeric with 4 values, 0, 0, 0, and 0. Okay, so now we're going to use a for loop. And we're going to replace, so in the for loop, we're going to loop through the values of vec2, the 4 different places, and each time we're going to basically make these values 29, 56, 90, and 170, which is 6 more than the value in vec1. So we're just going to get some practice on the for loop. Okay, so the for loop structure is for, then parentheses, same as if. In the for loop, we say, okay, what kind of looping do you want to do and how many times? And it's always this in this. And this is the structure I always use. There are other structures you can use in a for loop, but this works for me, and it's pretty easy. It's just I. This is I is index variable. That's like universal across almost all programming languages. You always use I as your index variable. And then we want to say, all right, well, how many values? We want I to take 4 different values. 1:4. Remember, 1:4 is our method of creating a vector. It's a shortcut method. So that is a vector 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I is going to take the value of 1. Then it's going to do whatever we put in our curly bracket. So we're going to execute some stuff in this curly bracket. Get to the end of the curly bracket, then I is going to take a value of 2. Do everything in the curly bracket. Then when it gets to the end of the end of that segment, gets the closing curly bracket, goes back up to the top, I is going to equal 3. Then it's going to do that stuff. Same thing up to I equals 4, and then it'll be done. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we want to fill in vec2 with vec1 plus 6, right? We want the first entry of vec2 to be 29, which is 23 plus 6. The next one's going to be 56, which is going to be 50 plus 6, etc. Okay, this won't work. Okay, this code, I've actually purposely put in a mistake here. What is the mistake? Well, where is our I? Where is our index variable, right? Well, the reason we're doing this for loop is because we need to do these values one at a time. So we want vec2 bracket I is going to be vec1 bracket I plus 6. Okay, so when I execute that, notice vec2 is now 29, 56, 90, and 170. But let's just step back for a second and figure out what just happened here. Well, for I in 1:4, so I takes a value of 1. Then we're going to say vec2 bracket 1. What is vec2 bracket 1? Well, that square bracket says I just want the first place. So the first location in vec2 is going to get the first location in vec1, which is 23 plus 6. Okay, and in fact, let me just show you how that works. If I just do manually say I equals 1, and then I execute this, or at least execute this one part at a time, vec2 bracket I is 29, which is going to be vec1 bracket I, which is the first place, which is vec1 bracket 1, because I equals 1 right now, plus 6, so 23 plus 6. So when we execute this, we reassign, it's already assigned as 29, but we reassign vec1, place 1 as 23 plus 6. But then after that, then it says, okay, well, now you're done with that. Now we're going to say I equals 2. And now we'll say vec2 bracket 2, because I equals 2. That's 56 right now. We're going to make that vec1 bracket 2. Second place was 50 plus 6. So we sign that in there, and we just repeat that. Okay, so hopefully that's clear what the for loop is doing. It's probably not well practiced or like really familiar, but we're going to get a little more practice. Hopefully you understand the structure and can replicate it. We'll get a little more practice now. To verify that worked, we're just going to do vec1 plus vec2. The reason I'm doing this, I want you to understand how addition works in vectors. So in a vector addition, we have a vector of 4 plus a vector of 4. When you add vectors together, it adds each place together. So the first place, we end up with another vector of 4, adding up 23 plus 29. This is 50 plus 56. And then what is it? 84 plus 90. And then 164 plus 170. So it adds each place up. Okay, so that's how vector addition works. Hopefully that's clear. All right. Now we do what I frequently have to do whenever I'm in R, and that is for loops with an embedded if statement. The reason I like to teach for loops with if statements is not only do they have a similar structure, it is because very often I need to actually check something in a data set. Let's say I've got a big data set and I need to go row by row and check something and then do something depending on what I find here, which means I loop through one row at a time, check the value here with an if statement, and then do something here. So the for loop to loop, and then the if statement to check something and do something depending on what I see. And so here what we're going to do is we're creating a for loop. We're going to check each value of vec1, one at a time, and then we're going to print whatever greater than 50 equals 50 or less than 50, depending on the value of vec1. Okay, so our structure of our for loop, for parentheses, how are we going to loop? Always I in, and we're still 4 values in the vector, 1 colon 4. Okay, then our curly brackets, do a hard carriage return. And now we're going to check, we're going to say if. Now our if statement, we're going to check the value of vec1, and depending on the value, we're going to print something. So first we want to check if vec1 is greater than 50. Okay, if it is, then we want to print greater than 50. Okay, so we're inside our for loop, but now that we're inside, we can kind of ignore these brackets because we're inside here, and we're just going to do our if statement inside, all indented here within this for loop. Okay, there's a problem here. I wonder if you can identify it. Take a second so you can see where did I go wrong here? And this is something I do go wrong very frequently. I just did it on purpose now, but very frequently I make this mistake on accident. There needs to be something else here. What is that? Vec1 is a vector with 4 values. The whole point of doing the for loop is because if statements can only evaluate one value at a time. So we need to index it, right? We need to actually just look at the one value at a time. Okay, so we're going to check when I start at I equals 1, we're going to check if that first value in that vector is greater than 50. If it is, we're going to print greater than 50. If it's not, then we say else. But then we have to check whether it's equal to 50, so we need another if statement. So now we're going to say is vec1 bracket I, don't forget the bracket, equals 50, which is a double equals. Okay, we finish that parentheses, open up another curly bracket. Now inside here, if that is true, that it is equal to 50, then we want to print equals 50. Okay, once we get to the end of that if statement, then we say, all right, well, if it's not, if both of those evaluated as false, it's not greater than 50, it's not equal to 50, in that case, we want to print less than 50. Okay, so we have our for loop. It's going to go, I is going to take a value of 1. It's going to evaluate whether vec1, this first value in vec1, which is 23, you can see right there. And if we're to check is vec1 greater than 50, this is going to return false. So then it's going to check is it equal to 50? That will return false. So it should then print less than 50. It gets at the end of this, so that's the end of the if statement. Then it gets to this bracket, which is the end of the for loop, which means it goes back up here. I will then take a value of 2, and then it'll check all these things as well. So when we do that, first it had the value of 23, so it said less than 50. Then it had a value of 50, so it says equals 50. The third entry in vec1 was greater than 50. Fourth entry was also greater than 50. Okay, notice this code is a lot shorter than this code, right? Because I didn't have to do this whole statement 4 different times. I just put a for loop around this and then indexed it correctly. And we can very efficiently go through a long list. And with the same amount of code, I can go through, a 10,000. If vec1 were a 10,000 entry vector, I could still do all of that just with the same amount of code. So that's the efficiency of for loops. Okay, so that's all the practice I'm going to give you for now. So the assignment is very straightforward, almost exactly the same as this. So I would encourage you not to just copy my code. See if you can do it on your own, just so you get a little practice, make this familiar. For loops are really valuable, but we're going to get a little more practice, and I'm going to give you some practice in an area where I genuinely use for loops all the time, and that is with a Qualtrics survey. So most of you, if not all of you, have probably done a Qualtrics survey before. I don't know how complex you've done your Qualtrics surveys, but in my Qualtrics surveys, I always have multiple conditions because I'm running some kind of an experiment. And this is data from an actual experiment I ran. What I did was I actually gave people a list of 10 hotels, and they had a continuous slider that went from 0 to 100, and I asked them to just move the slider to correspond to their perception of each hotel's quality. So I'm going to actually take a look at the HOT-EV dataset. This is hotel evaluations. Okay, let me show you a little bit of this. So by the way, whenever you do a Qualtrics survey, you've probably seen this. If you've ever done a Qualtrics survey, when you output the data to start date, all these variables, meta variables, right? Information about the survey itself. So 100 means, okay, this person finished the survey and everybody did. How long? This person only took 44 seconds to do the whole survey. This is when they finished or when they recorded the survey, which should align with basically end date. Then they get assigned a response ID. We get location data, so you can try to figure out where some of these people were located. Not that interesting, probably. Let me just show you a little more of it. So if we go to HOT-EV, I'll just look at the first 10 rows, and then I'll take a look at columns, let's say 15 to 20. Okay, so question 1 asks them is basically Holiday Inn. They had a Holiday Inn, and then they said, okay, what was your perception of this hotel's quality? For whatever reason, this first person thought Holiday Inn was a really, really nice hotel and rated it an 84. Quite generous, I think. The Travelodge, they rated as 69 out of 100, Econolodge 68, Best Western 73, the Hyatt 91, etc. Okay, so that was all of their evaluations of those hotels. Notice we have a bunch of NAs here. What happened was some people were evaluating the quality of the hotel, but then there was another set of participants that evaluated their price perception of each hotel. And so this is the way Qualtrics outputs the data. Whenever you're like one block of questions, it gives you all the answers for those people. But then some people answered another block of questions. You see their answers in separate columns. In fact, let me show you columns. Let's go 21 to 26 maybe. Okay. Well, so my last on this list was Hilton. And then we get to the Marriott. So this group of people, notice we have NAs here. So this first guy evaluated the quality of 10 different hotels. But all this data is missing. So there was another block of questions that asked people, what is your price perception of each of these hotels? And the second person answered those questions. So they thought Marriott is super cheap. They thought the Ritz-Carlton was really expensive. The Holiday Inn is even cheaper than Marriott, etc. So that is what the survey was like. And let me show you one more column. Let's see, that was 16. Let me just show you 10 to, let's say, 16. We have this variable qual, which is quality. Are they in the quality condition or the price condition? If qual is 1, they're in this quality condition. So they rated the quality of the 10 different hotels. If this is 0, they're in the price condition, which means all these quality perceptions are missing. The NA is missing. And then the Q2 underscore hotel name is their quality perceptions. Or sorry, their price perceptions. So that's 1 and 0. Okay, so what we have is we have a bunch of columns with data and then missing data. So what I want to do, and this is what I did do when I actually did the analysis on this, is I want to put all those evaluations in the same column. So I have either the price or their quality perception all in the same column, so I don't have a bunch of missing data in separate columns that are going to mess me up. Okay, so first thing, it says create a variable called Marriott. So we say Marriott. In HOT-EV, it's going to be a placeholder variable, and I just want to fill it with zeros. Okay, so I'm going to create this new variable called Marriott, and that is going to be filled with zeros. So one way to do that is just to type 0, comma 0. How many zeros do I need? I need 240. So let me just keep going. Just kidding. Okay, there's obviously an easier way to do that. If I want to fill in a column with zeros, I'm going to use my replicate function. Repeat 0 240 times. Okay, there is still an issue here. There's a problem. I'm trying to create a variable within HOTEV, my hotel evaluation data frame. Marriott is going to be a standalone variable. I don't want a standalone variable. I want a column within hotel evaluation data frame. So I say HOTEV $Marriott is going to be a bunch of zeros. And it's how many zeros? 240, because that's how many rows we have in hotel evaluation. I'm going to teach you one other thing here. This is one thing you don't have to adopt. But one good thing to do when you're coding is make your code usable in other circumstances. And one way I can do that is by saying n row of hot ev. N row is going to count how many rows are in hotel evaluation. So n row of hot ev is 240. But if for some reason I came in with other data that had more or fewer rows than 240, this code would still work even with a different data set. So when I do that, now let me just show you that that worked. So if we look at hot ev, and now there's 33 variables. So if I just look at the first 10 rows and I look at, say, columns 30 to 30 to 33. Now Marriott is just this column of zeros. Okay, the reason I did that is because when you do a for loop and you reference individual cells, that variable already has to exist. So now we have this variable, and now what I want to do is fill in this value with either the price perception or the quality perception, whichever one is there, right? It's going to be missing. One of those is going to be missing for each person, but one of them is going to be there for each person. Okay, so I want to fill in the Q1 Marriott, that's the quality perception for anybody where qual equals 0. And where qual equals 0, sorry, where qual equals 1, that was the quality perception. For the price perception, that's where qual equals 0. I want to fill it in with Q2 Marriott. So we're going to use a for loop with embedded if statements. So I'm going to loop through the entire data set. How do I loop through that? I say for, and in parentheses, how do I loop through the entire data set? I say always I in, and create my index vector. That's 1 colon, and I can either put 240 here, because there's 240 rows I'm going to loop through one at a time, or I can again do n row of hot ev. Okay, so remember, I is going to take a value of 1, then 2, then 3, all the way up to 240. So we're going to go through this hotel data set one row at a time. Each row I see, I want to see is qual equal to 1 or 0. If it's equal to 1, I want this new Marriott variable to take the value of Q1 underscore Marriott. If qual equals 0, I want this new Marriott variable to take the value of Q2 underscore Marriott. Okay, so what I want to do is say if what? What do I want to check? I want to check which condition they're in. Were they in the quality or the price condition, which means I need to check is qual equal to 1. Oops, sorry, double equal sign. Is qual equal 1? Problem there. What do I need? What's the problem? I've got two problems actually in this statement. This if statement is a problem. Number one is qual does not exist. It only exists within hotel evaluation. So I need to check if the hotel of $qual, I need to check that value if it's equal to 1. I'm also missing something here. Remember, an if statement, it can only check one value at a time. Hot of $qual is a vector of 200 length 240. It cannot evaluate all 240 at the same time, which means that's why I'm doing the for loop, and I need to index it with bracket I. Okay, so that's our if statement. It's checking, is this first value equal to 1? So this is only going to be checking one thing. Let me just make sure, just to verify this is going to work, say I equals 1. So now if I do that, and I evaluate this statement, this should evaluate as true or false. Happens to evaluate as true. Okay, so if it's true, what do I want to do? If it's true, that means this person was in the quality condition, which means the Marriott rating is found in Q1 underscore Marriott. And I want to place that value in the Marriott variable, which means I want hot ev $Marriott, my new variable that's all zeros right now. I'm going to fill it in with the hot ev $Q1 underscore Marriott. Okay, I hope you're screaming at the computer screen right now saying, wait, we missed something. What did we miss? Again, the index variable, right? We just want to replace that first value in Marriott with the Q1 underscore Marriott, the first value in there. Okay, so if it sees a 1 in qual, which means the data is contained in Q1 underscore Marriott, then I want to put that data in Q1 underscore Marriott into the Marriott variable. Okay, if qual is 0, which means I can just say else. So if qual is 0, that means the data is in Q2 underscore Marriott. So now I need to do hotev $ Marriott bracket I. So I want that second value, let's say. If that evaluates as if qual is 0, which means that first statement evaluate is false, I need to replace the Marriott data in this row with hotev $Q2 underscore Marriott. Bracket I, right? Just the one value at a time. Okay, so let's just look at this. So we're going to loop through. I is going to take a value of 1 all the way up to 240. One at a time is going to check, hey, what is the qual condition? What condition were they quality or price? Depending on which condition they're in, I'm going to replace this new Marriott variable with the appropriate value, wherever the data is found. Okay, and now if we take a look at hotev $ Marriott. So we look at the data. Now all of this whole column is filled in with numbers, no missing data. Okay. All right, so this is something I do all the time. Anytime I do a Qualtrics survey, because I usually ask a bunch of questions to people in different conditions, and the data is stored in a different place, it's missing, and so I have to put it all into the same column using a for loop with a bunch of if statements. Okay, so next we need to do that for the 9 other hotels. Okay, that's a lot. I don't want to do that much. So we're just going to do it for these 3. Actually, this should be Ritz-Carlton, no dash there. R does not like dashes in your variable names. It'll give you problems. Okay. So depending on how comfortable you're feeling, we can retype out this whole for loop and do this again, or we can just copy this. Actually, I'm going to type it out again, just to give us a little more practice. Okay. So our for loop. So we're looping through the data frame 1 row at a time. So we're setting up our for loop in the parentheses. We set up our looping, and it's going to be I in 1:240. But again, I'm going to use n row hotev, which is the same thing. This is just a little more versatile. Okay, then we do our if statement. So we're going to check what is the value of qual. So we're going to say hotev $qual bracket I. And what are we checking? We're going to check if it's 1 or 0. We want to see, okay, what happens if it's 1? In that case, the data is going to be found in Q1 underscore Marriott, which means we want, sorry, not Marriott. This time we're doing Ritz-Carlton. So we want hotev $Ritz-Carlton, not Q1 underscore Ritz-Carlton. Filled that in for me. We want a new variable called Ritz-Carlton, and that's going to be filled in with hotev $Q1 underscore Ritz-Carlton. What's my mistake? Bracket I on both of these. I hope you're catching these as I do them. All right, and then if not, then we want hotev $ Ritz-Carlton, not underscore, just Ritz-Carlton, bracket I should be, in that case, Ritz-Carlton. $. In that case, if qual equals 0, then it's going to be in this Q2 column. And bracket I. Okay, I think this is going to return an error. Let me go ahead and do that just to verify. Yeah, unknown or uninitialized column, Ritz-Carlton. Remember, this variable Ritz-Carlton that we want to store this data in doesn't exist in hotev. And so what happened here was we said, okay, first thing, I equaled 1. So it's going to check is hotel qual equal to 1. Hotel, it's true. Okay, in that case, we want to make the first entry of Ritz-Carlton to be this Q1 value, but this doesn't exist yet. So it just gave us an error because it's like, well, I have nothing to fill in. So what we have to do is create our placeholder variable. Okay, so we want one for Ritz-Carlton. Carlton, make sure I spell that right. Okay, and then I also want that for, let's see, I'll just do this, Travelodge and Intercontinental. This is Travelodge and Intercontinental. Okay, so now we should fill those in. It should, put the placeholder zeros, and then this for loop should work just fine. Okay, no errors. So let's take a look at the last couple columns of our data. Just look at the first 10 rows, and then columns 31 to 36. Great, we have Marriott filled in, we have Ritz-Carlton filled in, but Travelodge and Intercontinental are still zeros. Okay, that's what we're gonna have to fix here. So Ritz-Carlton, we also want Travelodge for both of those. Travelodge, and then here we want the Intercontinental. Okay, great. And then I can copy this down to here. Now what do I have to change? Okay, so I've copied this, so now it's going to do the same. It's going to fill in the right value for all three of these columns. Down here, what's the problem? I copied that so I don't have to type out the hotel names, but I just need to make sure those are Q2 now. Okay, so hopefully you understood everything we've done. And now if we take a look again, now let's look at columns, not curly bracket. Let's look at rows 31 to 40 of columns 33 to 36. Now all of these are filled in. Okay, great. So I wanted to show you that because that is something that happens all the time in Qualtrics surveys, which you're likely to do at some point in the future or in the past. Let's see. Okay, question 2, I left blank in this recitation session because I want it to align better with your assignment, so that's just blank. Now for question 13, we want to know if participants' quality perceptions and price perceptions differ systematically. That was the whole point of the experiment we ran. We want to create a report called PVQ, price versus quality, that reports the average quality perception and the average price perception for Marriott, Ritz-Carlton, Travelodge, and Intercontinental, the ones we've just filled in. Okay, so we can use dplyr on this. Okay, anytime we want a mean calculation, that's the average, the mean calculation by different groups, we're just going to use a group by summarize. So we say PVQ is going to get, starting with hot ev, and we're going to group by what? We want different means calculated. I don't know why that I always sneaks in there when I do group. Okay, we want to do different mean calculations for people in the quality condition and people in the price perception condition. Where do we have a variable that will separate those two groups into? That is our qual variable. So if we group by qual, remember the 1 means they were in the quality condition, 0 means they were in the price perception condition. So we have different calculation for that. And then group by is almost always followed by a summarize statement. And I'll just say mean mar for mean rating of Marriott. Say mean of Ritz for the mean of our Ritz-Carlton. Mean Trav for the mean of our Travelodge perception, and mean inter for the average perception of the intercontinental, whether price or quality. Okay, so do you know what you should expect here? We're going to have 4 different calculations, but we're grouped by qual. Qual takes a value of 1 or 0. So we'll have 2 calculations of each hotel's perception, whether that's a quality perception or price perception. And qual equals 0 means it was the price perception. The Marriott was on average perceived 67 out of 100 on like expensiveness, but on quality it was perceived as above 75. Okay, in the Ritz one, 86 for both highly expensive and high quality. Travelodge has at least one missing data point. So we have nothing for that. Next week, we will learn how to deal with missing values. Okay, so lower quality perception than Travelodge, as you might expect, and Intercontinental, pretty middle level, both price perception and quality perception. Okay, just like the assignment. Okay, which hotel is perceived as higher quality than its price? Clearly, the Marriott was the only one with a systematically higher, had a higher average. We don't know about the Travelodge because it had some missing data. Intercontinental actually had a higher price perception than its quality, so that's the Marriott here. Okay, here is the question. This is a speculative question. I want to get you thinking about this. Just answer the question this week, and it's going to be marked correctly, as long as you answer it intelligibly. And that is, okay, this difference in quality perception. The average perception between the Marriott, the quality and price, was 75.6 on quality, 67.0 on price. Do you think that's because in the marketplace in general, people perceive the Marriott to be higher quality than, than its appropriate price? It's actually a better quality, it's a better value, better quality for the price. Or is that just random noise? Right? Is that just a random distinction? People were rating it all over the place, and it just so happened we got a bunch of people in ones who gave Marriott 100. That's just your speculation. I want you to speculate on that. I think it's pretty clear that, the mean Ritz price and quality perception was different. It was 86.773 instead of 86.735. So is that difference systematic, or is that just random noise? That's clearly random noise. It's such a small difference. They have almost identical ratings. I want you to get thinking about that in week 10. We're going to learn about statistical tests to test, okay, is this a real difference, or is that just kind of random noise? Okay, again, you're not going to be marked wrong. Just answer the question. So if you don't answer the question, you'll get it marked wrong. But if you answer the question anyway, it'll be marked correctly on the assignment. Okay, now I'm actually going to teach you to do something new that I didn't actually train you how to do this in the lecture. So, and that is, we're going to use a new command called the if-else command. One of the big weaknesses of if statements is that you can only evaluate one value at a time. The if-else command lets you put in a vector and then evaluate the entire vector and then do something on a vector basis, depending on if it's true or false, which for this circumstance ends up being really useful. So what I want to do is I'm going to create the Holiday Inn variable and check, okay, which condition are they in? Fill it in with either the quality perception or the price perception, depending on which condition they're in. And this gets a lot easier than doing a for loop with an embedded if statement. So let me just show you how that works. So what I want to first do is type help if else. So we can see the help documentation. So if you go here to the help documentation, just so you know for your future reference, another way to do that is just type question mark if else, and that opens this help documentation as well. Okay, it returns a value. So this is the command. You just say if else, and then we have 3 entries. The test, that is, what are you testing? What's the true false statement you're looking for? If it's true, what do you want to have happen here? If it's false, what do you want to have happen here? Okay, so take a second, see if you can figure out how to do this. $, Holiday Inn. Okay, Holiday Inn is going to be a new variable, and I don't actually have to pre-specify it here because I'm doing it all at once, and I'm going to fill it in with the appropriate value using an if-else statement. Okay, so remember, if-else has 3 entries. Take a minute, pause the video if you're watching this on delay, and see if you can figure out how to do this. Just knowing the code. This is like a really useful skill if you're ever going to do anything in any kind of coding, is looking at documentation and figuring out how to apply it. Okay, we have 3 entries. First thing is, what are we testing? Remember, we're trying to fill in Holiday Inn with either the quality perception or the price perception, depending on what? Depending on what we find in the qual column. So if hotel $, qual equals 1, okay, if that evaluates as true, what do I want to put into $, Holiday Inn? I want to put in $, Q1 underscore Holiday Inn. Okay, and if it's false, which means qual equals 0, which means their data is going to be the price perception, which is stored where? $, Q2 underscore Holiday Inn. Okay, I'm missing my brackets. Where should I put brackets? Nowhere. That's the whole value of this if-else statement. I don't have to go one at a time. I'm putting in the entire vector of hotel qual, and I'm saying, okay, check the value, each of the values here, and then fill it in with the appropriate corresponding value in Q1 or in Q2. And so it's going to do this all at once. So if we take a look at hot ev $ holiday in now, we have 240 values filled in. Okay, so instead of doing this for loop with the embedded if, I can just use a single if-else statement. Both of them work. If the for loop and the if-else, the if statement works better for you, do that. If-else is much more efficient. And this will come in handy later on in later assignments. So it might be worthwhile to learn this. Okay, so do the same thing for Hyatt in the Four Seasons. So I'm going to say hot ev $ Hyatt is going to be, and I do my if-else. I'm checking my, what condition are they in? That's a hot ev $ qual. I'm checking whether it's equal to 1. If it is equal to 1, I want to fill in the Hyatt column with the Q1 underscore Hyatt. If it's not true, if the value weights is false, I want to fill it in with a Q2 underscore Hyatt. Okay, and then I will go ahead and make things easy on myself by just filling in this with, where else am I looking for? The other, oh, the Four Seasons. Okay, that showed up green, which means it probably worked. So now create that same report from Q13, but fill in these new 3 variables we also already did. So I'm just gonna copy this, come down here, and then I'll add to this report mean hall for the mean of Holiday Inn. Say mean Hyatt for the mean of the Hyatt ratings, and mean for the mean of the Four Seasons ratings. Okay, so now this should have 7 different mean columns in 2 different groups. So we take a look at PBQ now. And we have all of these calculations. Again, we're missing Holiday Inn on their price perception there. But, and we're also missing the quality perception of the Four Seasons. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and teach you right now one way to deal with missing data. And actually, let's just take a look at the help for the mean calculation. So the mean, you just have to say mean, and there's the numbers, the vector of numbers you're taking the mean of. There is this option here of na.rm equals false. So that is the by default. You don't have to type this in whenever you calculate a mean. That's by default is there, right? Na.rm is, this is a logical evaluated true or false, indicating whether missing values should be stripped before the computation proceeds. By default, na.rm equals false, which means we don't strip the missing values. Here, I was missing values in the, if I say instead na.rm equals t, sorry. If instead I say na.rm equals t, now it's going to get rid of the missing values. And so when I do this report, now instead of missing here, now we can see the price perception of the Four Seasons. All right, that was missing before. So now we have that. For whatever reason, this group of people thought the Four Seasons had the same price level as the Marriott, which is definitely not true, but so went their perceptions. Okay, so that's something next week we'll deal with NAs, missing values with is.na. So you can look forward to that next week. But hopefully you can see the value of if statements and for loops. We'll do a little bit more kind of nitty gritty, getting around data with other commands next week. Okay, good luck.